we're starting to enter the areas that aren't usually open to the public.
That's where all the good stuff is, right?
The beginning of the battle, for days afterward, there's just lines of troops moving up and down, prisoners coming down, and
right
especially down the road, and especially wounded from Gettysburg.
Wounded.
You can see what it must have been like
Yeah.
to run down these stairs at 2 in the morning, seeing the cavalry coming. There's a provost marshal assigned to protect both households, and he is disarming drunkards falling asleep behind trees.
Wow.
He shoots a man who was threatening the family right here in front of our mill. So it gets pretty chaotic.
Hey everybody, Dana Shove, Director of Interpretation at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, with Kyle Dalton, Executive Director of the Union Mills Homestead. We are inside this labyrinthian house. It has 26 rooms
Yes.
that all sort of interconnect and weave and twist and turn around each other. And each room is full of really cool, fascinating stuff.
How big it is today is about how big it would have been by the time of the Civil War.
Okay.
The footprint is pretty much
This
the
is what
same.
Civil War soldiers would have seen then.
In 1860, yes. And this is where Andrew lives.
Andrew, okay.
Andrew, he is the unionist, of the two brothers.
But let's move to the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg in late June. Mm-hmm. Who comes calling here?
Well, the cavalry under Jeb Stuart comes marching down the road.
Okay.
They are first spotted very early in the morning by the enslaved woman here, Ruth, who wakes the rest of the family and then lets everybody know, hey, they're coming. My guess is, we don't know exactly, but her dwelling place overlooks the road.
Okay.
So she's best positioned in the house geographically to see it. So this room here to our left is where Ruth lived. This is where, looking out onto the street, she saw Jeb Stuart's cavalry coming.
Wow.
Yes.
So that's the window Ruth saw Jeb Stuart's cavalry approaching from. Wow. So she wakes up and sees...
I also wonder if she got any sleep, because there's a lot of warnings coming down the road. There were riders saying the cavalry is coming, the rebels are coming.
This is Stuart's notorious raid where he breaks loose from the Army of Northern Virginia and
Yes.
swings up through Carroll County. It
Right.
swings to the east of the advancing armies. Yeah.
And so I think that as an enslaved woman who's heard stories about the Confederates coming through, again, we're not that far from Pennsylvania, and on the other side, there is re-enslavement and enslavement happening. I think she's probably not sleeping. I think she's looking at the road. And when she hears horses coming down, that's when she's like, okay, we need to act. We need to get ready for these guys coming. So she alerts the rest of the family here. Of course, across the street, the reaction is very different. Here, they kind of button up. They try to hide their horses. It doesn't work. They're a little worried, understandably, as Unionists. But as some of the few secessionists in the county, William's family is more than happy to welcome them. They have breakfast laid out for them. There's dancing. There's singing. So they're having a grand old time. Yes.
There's basically a Confederate party across the road.
Yes. So Fitzhugh Lee comes through first. Jeb Stuart comes later. And all these luminaries of Jeb Stuart's staff are all being feted at the house across the street. They then offer their son, T. Herbert Shriver, who's 16 at the time, to act as a guide for them, a scout. And he leads them on up to Gettysburg.
Wow, incredible. Yeah.
Now that brings us back to a sort of medical connection. We mentioned in the last video that his elder brother Kai was a medical purveyor in Richmond.
Right.
And in the University of Notre Dame, they have some of these letters that he wrote. And it's on medical department letterhead.
Oh, that's interesting.
And there he recommends that his younger brother, T. Herbert, be admitted to VMI.
Oh.
And he is. He ends up at the field of Lost Shoes. He fights with them.
The Battle of Newmarket.
Yes.
From here.
Yeah. Again, something you'd expect out of a novel. If it wasn't so well documented, you'd think it was made up.
Yeah. Does he survive that battle unscathed?
He does. Okay. He later becomes a major politician in the state of Maryland.
Okay.
He's a state senator. He's briefly considered for governor. He's a presidential elector.
Okay.
He lives a long and very successful political life.
Very successful. Yeah, wow. Now, Kyle has brought out, is this the actual letter or a copy?
This is the original.
Okay,
this is
the original
October 27th, 1861 letter from Richmond, Virginia, from Kai, Andrew Kaiser, the nephew Andrew, to Henry Wirt Shriver, the one who joins Pennsylvania Emergency Forces. You can see he had a lot to say. He writes, 4 pages and still didn't have enough room, so he cross-writes over the first page to keep going until he eventually signs it.
Horizontally and vertically on that page.
Yes.
And you see that from time to time in Civil War letters. They do that. And you got to go slow, but you can make it out.
Yes.
So he calls himself surgeon, but he's really an administrator in Richmond, helping to set up and establish the hospital network in the capital of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Which is really interesting stuff.
And his role is dictated here, as we mentioned in the first video. I read a little excerpt from that. But something you don't get from the transcriptions is the response by Wirt, because the point of the letter is not to say what he's doing down there, but to convince Wirt that the Southern cause is right, that he should join, that he should come down. What's interesting about this is the envelope that comes with it. Because on the envelope, Wirt gives a kind of a passive-aggressive response. You'll see it's Mr. H. Wirt Shriver, Union Mills, Carroll County, Maryland. Received. They've marked received. Union has been underlined twice in a different pen and a different hand.
Oh my gosh.
Wirt is saying Union.
Wow.
He's changing the name of the site. He's re-emphasizing Union in a new way.
Like he read the letter and like, no way.
Yes. He does eventually write back to him an actual response.
Wow.
But my read of that is that's his initial reaction is just, like, how dare you?
Like, no way. So the Confederate cavalry, they move on.
Yes.
And then who comes calling next?
Just hours after the departure of Jeb Stuart's cavalry, the Union 5th Corps shows up.
And the 5th Corps is not the furthest east corps, but it's
out there.
As Union Corps advance, it's one. I think the 6th Corps is the only one further east.
I think you're right.
But they come up. The corps come up like fingers through through Frederick and Carroll County, and the 5th Corps comes right here to Union Mills.
Yes, 1st Division comes through under General Barnes.
James Barnes, right?
Yes, and he stops here, and the situation is reversed, where William was having a great time before, and Andrew's family was pretty scared. Now it's the opposite. William's family is buttoning up.
They're buttoning up over there, and they're opening their doors.
Yes, they have a big party in here. They also sing songs and have dinner. Barnes stays in the house. We'll see that in a little bit, where he would have stayed. And the family dog is given to a friendly officer on his staff.
My gosh.
Frank, who joins the Army of the Potomac.
All right, so is this the bed here?
It's possibly this bed. There's so many original items in this house. I'd say well over 90% of everything we see in this house is original to the family.
But this is the room where General James Barnes, 5th Corps Division commander, stayed.
Yes.
He got to stay tonight, and you brought a picture of him out here.
Yeah, we have a photo of General Barnes. He stays in this room, which is called the Irving Room. It's believed that Washington Irving stayed in here.
Wow. Now, did the family rent rooms because they were on a road, or just people come here and end up staying?
Yeah, they would rent this room specifically, and maybe some others. This did operate as a post office. It was right at a nice junction for that.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, the first rural free delivery service is out of this building.
Oh, wow.
And they have a tavern here as well.
Okay.
So there's a number of people passing through. Yes.
So this is where Irving stayed. It's believed in this Washington Irving, of course, Sleepy Hollow, which is great. And also James Barnes stayed in this room, which is really fascinating.
And they continue to let other people stay in this room as well. Over here we have a portrait of Washington Irving that was given to the family by Colonel John P. Nicholson.
John Page Nicholson?
Yes. You'll see April 1903, Gettysburg Battlefield Commission.
Oh, well, Nicholson takes over after Batchelder.
Yes.
And Nicholson is a forgotten man when it comes to the establishment of the Gettysburg Battlefield, I think. I did not know that you had a Nicholson signed.
Yeah.
I'm sort of a Nicholson buff a little bit because there's a monument to him up there in the battlefield.
Yes, and he was pivotal in the commemorations of Gettysburg.
Yes.
This family was deeply interested in that.
Well, one of the men, I wanted to show you this picture. We just got this in our collection. This is Darius Little, and the reason I have this is that even though Darius is in civilian clothes, he's in the 44th New York, which is in Barnes Division of the 5th Corps, so he's camped somewhere around one of these fields around here. He's somewhere out there, along with the 20th Maine of Little Round Top fame. Mm-hmm. So we just recently acquired this from a relative, Chris Lilly, and we're going to put it on exhibit soon. I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to show you a face of someone that was here. So here comes the 5th Corps and Barnes Division, and what happens there?
They stick around for a night, and again, they're having a great time over here. Next door, they're having a much rougher time, and it goes for a lot longer than it did for these folks when Jeb Stuart's cavalry was here. William's family, again, there's not that many secessionists in Carroll County. There are some. This is a border state.
But he's known.
He's known, and sometimes they get harassed by stragglers or even by mainline infantry, and sometimes they would be told, like, we've been told about you. We know about you. Like the neighbors around are telling the Union infantry as they're coming through, hey, watch out for these guys. So they get threatened, sometimes at gunpoint. Things are broken. Things are stolen. It's not great for them. And they kind of bunker down for a few days. And for a long time, from the beginning of the battle, for days afterward, there's just lines of troops moving up and down, prisoners coming down, and especially down the road, and especially wounded from Gettysburg.
And ambulances, you said.
Ambulances as well, yes.
Because they're heading to Westminster.
Yes, and the train station there and some hospitals there.
Yeah, to get out. So, and this town pump plays into, well, not town pump, the household pump plays into that story.
Yes. So Lewis writes about this, writing in 1930. He says, many Union soldiers who were only slightly injured and could help themselves would stop by the old log pump in our front yard and dress their wounds. I would sometimes do the pumping for them. Wow. He's about 12 years old at this time.
So the wounded are walking down the road in ambulances, and they're just sort of filtering through this yard.
Yes. There's also a lot of stragglers. Drunkenness is pretty widespread. There's a provost marshal assigned to protect both households.
Oh, really?
His tent is set up just behind the kitchen over here. And he is disarming drunkards, falling asleep behind trees. Wow. He shoots a man who was threatening the family right here in front of our mill. So it gets pretty chaotic during this period.
Because it's 18 miles is not far, and this is a direct, a major road takes them right to Westminster.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of the supply wagons and stuff were kept and everything. So there's a lot of drift traffic back down this road. I mean, can you imagine this road out here full of wagons and ambulances with wounded men in them and walking wounded, clogging the road? Coming down here, getting a drink of water. Really.
And getting a sense of scale. Sarah Clementine Shriver, one of the daughters of William across the street, she writes on July 5th, many of those who were here had been 2 days without any food and were almost worn out with fatigue. They lay upon the road on the bare ground. I thought my heart would break when they asked me for bread and I had no more to give. We hear that they extended for 8 miles upon the roads. Wow. If I could have sent Lena or someone to help, but I could get no one to go, and there was so much alarm everywhere that they would have been afraid to come. In the morning, Mrs. H came. She brought bread, so on and so forth. Yeah. So this gives you an idea of the chaos and the scale of it.
Yeah, and how involved the family is.
And this is July 5th. Yeah. There are still wounded moving down the road on July 6th. So from July 2nd through July 6th, at least, there's just a constant stream of wounded and prisoners heading one direction and soldiers and equipment heading the other
direction. So, again, Maryland's a border state with some conflicted loyalties. And even though we are just a stone's throw from the Pennsylvania line, there are enslaved people living here, and it's totally legal, but he's a Union sympathizer. He believes in Union. And one of those enslaved people dies here during the war, right?
Yes. I first found out about this through a 1930 journal, I guess you could say, a sort of a memoir, written by one of the residents of the house here, Julius H. Shriver.
Okay.
He's born 1851. He dies in 1944. And from 1869, really until his death, he's writing almost every day. Yeah. He's a very prolific writer, very involved. This is Lewis's room, recreated based on a selfie he took in the early 1900s.
So he was a pioneer photographer, really, you said?
Yes, he loved photography. We have hundreds of his photographs, including this one, which, as I mentioned, is how we were able to reconstruct this room. This was taken in 1903.
So he's selfieing himself
in this mirror using this camera.
That's crazy.
And as a child, he considered an enslaved boy here named Harry to be his best friend, because he was the only one close in age to him. He was the youngest boy in the family. And so he had very vivid memories of Harry. Even writing many decades later, he was able to recall specific things that they played or what the space that Harry lived in looked like, the stories they would share, those kinds of things. And he does say that he remembers some point early in the Civil War, he remembered Harry dying, and he remembered seeing the funeral and crying as he looked down from the hill. But we did find a little bit more information from the time in the letters of the Shrivers. So unfortunately, it's very scant. All we have is from a journal written by A.K. Shriver, I believe, the elder patriarch of the family. Dr. Matthias came to see Harry, who had been sick for some time, and says he is very ill, that if he does not get better tonight, there is no hope for him. So he does say that he's been sick for some time, but they didn't call the doctor until now. So it's kind of hard to diagnose what this could be. We really aren't sure. But it seems to have been something that, even though it had been lingering for a bit, it escalated very suddenly. The very next day, he writes, Harry died this morning about daybreak. He was unconscious the whole night and sank very rapidly after midnight. Again, giving an impression that there is a rapid onset. Charlie Creamer and I went down to the Barrens to make arrangements for his funeral. There's a local graveyard that was used by both free and enslaved African Americans for burial near here. And there's some detail about the funeral that Lewis gives us as well.
Interesting. So in the Unionist family, they're enslaved. People dies, right? So not all medical stories are military or during the war.
And
or in hospitals.
As is argued in Sick from Freedom by
Jim Downs.
Jim Downs. That there's a lot of epidemics spreading because of the war, especially among the freed community. And again, we're not that far from Pennsylvania. There are a lot of freedom marches from Maryland into D.C. Now, there's nothing recorded like that in here, but it's hard to trace epidemics of the period.
No. And as Downs points out, all the epidemics that, race through the white community race through the African American community as well. And because for the same reasons.
And as we know, and as Civil War medicine talks about all the time, disease is much more of a killer than violence in the Civil War.
Yes, absolutely.
So it often starts with these armies that are marching around and then spreads into these communities. So I think it's fair to say that this disease is likely to have been related to the war itself.
Very possible. So it's been a very interesting visit here to Union Mills. And again, the stories about not all the medical stories you hear are related to military hospitals or even soldiers. We had the enslaved person that passed away in the house during the war, and then I can just imagine the walking wounded coming here. So I want to thank you for showing us around, Colin. Like I said, the museum is going to work with Union Mills. This year we hope to at least get one of our ambulances here, and next year maybe we can, have a deeper partnership on things.
I would like to thank everybody who has joined us. And if you like what you've seen, please consider supporting the Union Mills Homestead.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are a private nonprofit, just like you guys. I know a lot of your members follow. So.
And you have a website. What's that?
We do. UnionMills.org.
Yeah, check it out, UnionMills.org. And if you're in the region, or even if you're in Gettysburg, and you want to take a little trip out from Gettysburg to see some sites related to the campaign, you can come here to Union Mills. And you can swing to Frederick and you can see the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. So we're always welcome to have you there as well.
Check out Citizen Meets Soldier, July 20th and 21st. We'll have a lot of activities and programs related to the stuff we just talked about.
Excellent.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming out.